Daf Yomi, tractate Avodah Zarah, page 69, and starting at the bottom of 68b, Iboilahu, a dilemma was raised before the sages. Turning now to 69a at the top of the words Nafal, Lago, Chala, Mai. نفعل خلماي أمر لرب هيل الغواشي أبيوم النبي برب كهنة وسوب كهنة عليها أمرتت. If a mouse fell into vinegar, what is the halacha? Does it enhance its flavor? Rav Hillel said to Rav Ashi, there was such an incident in the study hall of Rav Kahana, and Rav Kahana deemed the vinegar forbidden. This indicates that it enhances the flavor. Rav Ashi said to him, this is not proof. That mouse was dismembered, and Rav Kahana deemed the vinegar forbidden due to concern that one might consume a substantive piece of the mouse in the vinegar, which is prohibited regardless of the taste. Ravina Sava Lisor B'Meir V'Chad Amar Lo Gara Mitruma Ditnan Truma Ula B'Echad B'Mea Amar Rav Zarchlifa Bar Giza L'Ravina Dinu HaTavlin Shem Truma B'Kedei Adami Tilo Batel Tamayu. The Gemara relates Ravina thought that the quantity of vinegar necessary for nullifying the flavor of the mouse should be calculated at 101 times the volume of the mouse. By the way, I have to pause here, and I'm going to be doing this bli neder. I would say Mirz Hashem, but I don't know if it's misusing the word or not, but expression, but this is, God willing, why not? This is my Peel 89 calendar, and anytime I see a number that comes up in the Talmud or anything that directly relates to the calendar, because this is what this calendar is all about. Okay? Today is August 26th, and on the calendar it's 21, and in this calendar, 21 equals 101, and because of the law of 40, 21, 61, 101, 141. Anything with 40. And the first thing I come up on today's daf is the number 101. And I don't know how that happens. This happens, it doesn't just happen once in a blue moon. I'm seeing this happening just about every day when the numbers line up that way. I'm not sure what's going on, but that's one of those times. Okay, so basically, Ravina thought that the quantity of vinegar necessary for nullifying the flavor of the mouse. And by the way, 29 is tomorrow on the calendar, and this is daf 69. And 29 equals 69, because of the law of 40. And the rectangle makes today the same thing. Okay. Ravina thought that the quantity of vinegar necessary for nullifying the flavor of the mouse should be calculated at 101 times, which the PL 89 ancestor is 21. The volume of the mouse, he said, it should not be rendered worse, meaning more stringent than truma, which is nullified at 101 times its volume in a mixture. This is as we learned in the Mishnah in Trumot 4:7. Truma is nullified in a mixture by 101 times its volume of permitted food. Rav Tachlifa Bar Giza said to Ravina, perhaps this case is similar to spice of truma in a pot, whose flavor is not nullified even by 101 times its volume of permitted food, as the flavor imparted by spice is exceptionally strong. Rav Achai she'ar b'chalab b'chamshin, Rav Shmuel b'red Rav Yika she'ar b'shicha b'shitin. Rav Achai calculated the amount of vinegar necessary to nullify the flavor of the mouse at 50 times its volume. Although forbidden food in a mixture usually requires the presence of 60 times its volume of permitted food to be nullified, vinegar has a sharp enough flavor that it nullifies the mouse with less. Rav Shmuel, son of Rav Ika, calculated the amount of beer necessary for nullifying the mouse at 60 times the volume of the mouse. V'hilchata, idi v'idi, b'shitin, v'chen, kol isurin shebatorah. The Gemara concludes, and the halacha is, that this and that, both vinegar and beer, nullify the mouse with 60 times its volume, and so is the ruling for all prohibitions in the Torah. That's the end of that. New Mishnah. Zog the Mishnah, Cheshahay Mavim Yisrael, Kedei Yim Korm Lemaka, Mimai V'chesar, Som Shtamel, Motal, Imhod Yeshiv Maflik, Kedei Ishtom, V'Yistom, V'Yigov, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Kedei Sheyiftach Esach Chavis, V'Yigov V'Tigov. The Mishnah says, with regard to a non-Yehudi who was transporting barrels of wine from one place to another place together with a Yehudi, if the wine was under the presumption of being supervised, it is permitted. But if the Yehudi notified him that he was going far away, the wine is forbidden if the Yehudi left for a sufficient amount of time for the non-Yehudi to bore a hole, sheyishtom, in the barrel, seal it again with plaster, and for the plaster to dry. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says the wine is forbidden only if it was sufficient time for the non-Yehudi to open the barrel by removing the stopper altogether. Stop it again by making a new stopper, and for the new stopper to dry. With regard to one who placed his wine in a wagon or on a ship with a non-Yehudi and went on his way by a shortcut, such that the non-Yehudi does not know when the Yehudi will encounter him, even if the Yehudi entered the city and bathed, the wine is permitted, because the non-Yehudi would not use the wine for a libation for fear the owner might catch him at it. Yehoshua maflik, Kadei sheishtom yistom v'yigov. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Kadei sheyiftach esachovis v'yigov v'tigov. If the Yehudi informed the non-Yehudi that he was going away for a long period of time, the wine is forbidden if it was sufficient time for the non-Yehudi to bore a hole in the barrel, seal it again with plaster, and for the plaster to dry. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says it's forbidden only if it was sufficient time for him to open the barrel by removing the stopper altogether, stop it again, and for the new stopper to dry. V'yista v'yigov, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Kedei sheyiftach esachovis v'yigov v'tigov. With regard to one who left a non-Yehudi in his shop, even if the Yehudi went out and came in and was not there all the time, the wine is permitted. But if the Yehudi informed the non-Yehudi that he was going away for a long period of time, the wine is forbidden if it was sufficient time for the non-Yehudi to bore a hole in the barrel, seal it again with plaster, and for the plaster to dry. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says the wine is forbidden only if it was sufficient time for him to open the barrel, stop it again, and for the new stopper to dry. Haya ochel imo al shulchan, ונלך לגינין על השולחן ולגינין על עדול בקי. והניחו ויצא, מה שעל השולחן אסור, שעל עדול בקי מותר. אם אמר לא, אבי מוזק ושותי, אף שעל עדול בקי אסור, חביוס בטוחוס אסור, סתומוס מותרוס, כדי שיפתח ויגוב ותיגוב. If a Yehudi was eating with a non-Yehudi at the table, and left jugs of wine on the table, and a jug on the side table. That's the Hadud Baki. And he left it and went out. What is on the table is forbidden, as it is likely that the non-Yehudi handled it, whereas what is on the side table is permitted. But if Yehudi said to the non-Yehudi, mix water with the wine and drink, even the jug that is on the side table is forbidden. Similarly, open barrels are forbidden, but sealed barrels are permitted unless the Yehudi was out of the room for sufficient time for the non-Yehudi to open the barrel by removing the stopper and stop it again by making a new stopper, and for the new stopper to dry. Now the Talmud. So the Talmud, Hechi Damim. B'chezkas hamishtamer kedetanya. Harei she'aya chama u'pa'alav tunin taos. Afilu hivnig mehen yoter mimin tarot av tarot. V'im amar lahen nechu v'ani ba chalechem. Kevan shenit'alma eino mehem torotav temeot. The Gemara says, what are the circumstances described by the phrase under the presumption of being supervised? The Gemara asks this. The Gemara explains, it is as it is taught. In the Braita, if one's donkey drivers and laborers were unreliable with regard to ritual impurity, and they were laden with wine or produce that was ritually pure, and he had instructed them not to tamper with it, but he does not know whether or not they heeded him, even if he went away from them to a distance of more than a mil, his pure items are still pure, as it may be presumed that he heeded his instructions. But if he said to them, go and I will come after you, so that they knew he would be going with them, then once they are out of his sight, his pure items are impure. Ma'ishna reisho, ma'ishna seifo. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak reisha b'mitach, amar ba'al d'chach. The Gemara asks, what is different in the first clause where the produce is pure, and what is different in the latter clause where it is impure? Rabbi Yitzchak said the ruling of the first clause is stated with regard to a case where he purified his donkey drivers and laborers for this assignment by having them immerse, so they would not transfer impurity to the produce. Ihachi seifanami en am haaretz makpid al magat chavero. Ihachi afilu reishanami hachi. The Gemara raises a difficulty. If that is so, the latter clause, in the latter clause, this would also apply. The Gemara answers, in Am Haaretz is not punctilious about contact with another person. Although they themselves were purified, they may have met another Am Haaretz on the way, and the produce would be rendered impure by him. The Gemara further objects, if so, then let us say so even in the first clause, the produce should be impure in that case as well. Amarava was said. Now we turn to 69b, Samach Tet Amud Bet. If I remember correctly, Samach Tet is an acronym that the Maimonides, the Rambam, used to sign. And some theorize that it's for the acronym to stand for the word Svardi Tahor, pure Svardi. I think he used to sign Samach Tes in the end. That's what I remember hearing about the Rambam. That reminds me of it, Samach Tes. At any rate, we're on Samach Tes Bet, top of the page, with words Bevalahem Derech Akalaton. Akalaton. Akalaton, 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 Akalatona. Akalatona, Akalatona, Akalatona. I think we'll take a brief little break here, Hafsaka, and we'll continue with Zarah Hashem after the break. We are back. Top of 69b with the words Bevalahem Derech Akalaton. Bevalahem Derech Akalaton Yarizevnami Kevan De'amalahem Nechuvani Ba'achalechem Samcha Datayu. In a case where he came to them in a roundabout way, such that they would not know from where he might appear, and they would be afraid to tamper with the goods because he might catch them in the act. The Gemara objects, if that is so, this can apply to the latter clause also. The Gemara answers, in the case of the latter clause, since he said to them, go and I will come after you, their minds are at ease that he will not surprise them. It's just been a question of mine for a long time. Why does it sometimes say, when it quotes the line of the Mishnah, when the Gemara is about to discuss it, it goes, let's say, this, and this, and it says, sometimes it says vichule, and, etc., vichule, and sometimes it just says chule, or kule. I've been paying attention to it, and it really seems like 6 versus half a dozen. It doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to why they switch it. So the question is, why do they switch it? Why don't they just say v'chule all the time? Or kule all the time? I was trying to identify a pattern. But if you notice, just like for instance right here, okay? And it doesn't switch off all the time. It's not like this and that. It could be, I'm really curious to know why there are these two words, v'chule and chule. Okay, hamaniach, and the Mishnah said hamaniach nachri b'chanuso, kule. Okay, hamaniach yeno b'karon o b'svina, kule. But many times, it could have just as well said v'chule, meaning they both mean etc. But why do they choose, does the editor or whoever put this in there, put the Talmud together, choose at times to put vichule and time kule? That's just I call it a personal takeover of mine. The Mishnah teaches similar cases, including the case of one who left a non-Yehudi in his shop, and the case of one who placed his wine in a wagon or on a ship. The Gemara explains, and it is necessary for the Mishnah to cite all these cases, even though they appear similar, as had the Mishnah taught only the case of the non-Yehudi transporting a Yehudi's barrels. One might assume that the reason there is no concern that the non-Yehudi use the wine in the case is because he thinks that perhaps the owner will come and see him. But in a wagon or on a ship, one might say that he can take his ship far off and do what he desires in such a way that the owner cannot see him. And had the Mishnah taught only the case where the Yehudi placed his wine in a wagon or on a ship, one might assume that the concern there is because the non-Yehudi thinks perhaps he will come on a different road or stand on the bank of the river and see me. But in the case of a non-Yehudi in his shop, one might say that he can hold the door closed and do whatever he desires with no concern of being seen. Therefore the Mishnah teaches us that in all these cases the same ruling applies, and there is no concern unless the Yehudi informs the non-Yehudi that he is going a great distance away. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana Amar Yochanan machloket b'she'asid aval b'shiltit divrei hakol k'dei sheyiftach yigov. There is a dispute in the Mishnah with regard to the length of time that causes the wine to be rendered forbidden if the owner notified the non-Yehudi that he is going off some distance. Rabba bar bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says the dispute is only with regard to the case of a stopper made with lime plaster, in which a hole can be sealed with without being detected, but with regard to the case of a stopper made of clay, in which a patch would be detected, everyone agrees that the wine is forbidden only if there was enough time for the non-Yehudi to open the barrel by opening the stopper entirely, stop it again with a new stopper, and for the new stopper to dry. Meisvei Amar Shimon ben Gamliel Chachamim, v'lo situlo nikal bein milmala bein milmata. The Gemara raises an objection to this explanation of the dispute from Ibraitam. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said to the rabbis, but isn't the ceiling of the hole noticeable both from above and from below, and therefore the non-Yehudi will be wary of doing so? Ela iamet bishel sid machloket bishlom lemata yedia ela lemalaha lo yedia. The Gemara explains the objection granted if you say that the dispute is also with regard to the stopper made of clay. This explanation is consistent with that which the Brisa teaches. As the response of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, its ceiling is noticeable both from above and from below. But if you say that the dispute is with regard to a stopper made of lime plaster, granted the location of the ceiling is noticeable from below, as it is impossible to fill the entire hole with lime plaster, and an empty space remains below it, but the resealing is not noticeable from above. Okay? From above. From above. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel de la yada ma'ikar Rabbanan v'arichamalo ibo shetit kamaritu situ ma'nikar ben milvala ben milvato im shem sit kamaritu nihi dilmala lo yedia limata biya yedia Rabbanan kevan dilmala lo yedia lo masikadai jidafi chazalem The Gemara answers, it was Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel who did not know what the rabbis were saying. And this is what he is saying to them. If you are speaking of a stopper made of clay, its ceiling is noticeable both from above and from below. And if you are speaking of a stopper made of lime plaster, granted it is not noticeable from above, but it is noticeable in any event from below. And how would the rabbis respond to this claim? They maintain that since it is not noticeable from above that there is a patch, it does not occur to the non-Yehudi that the owner will turn the stopper over and see the patch. Alternatively, the rabbis could answer that sometimes it seals firmly and is not detectable. Rava says the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, since we learned an unattributed Mishnah is in accordance with his opinion. I thought it was Rameir. And Stam Mishnah is Rameir. What's going on here? Okay. Anyway, Ditznan Hayochel al Shulchan Imo V'niach Legin al Shulchan Legin al Adul Bekim V'niach Yatza Mashi al Shulchan Asu Mashi al Adul Bekim Utam V'im Amar Lo Habe Mozag V'shote Af She'al Adul Beki Asu Chaviyot Ptuchot Asurot Situmot Mutarat Kedei Shiftach V'Gof V'Tigov. This is, as we learned in the last clause, the Mishnah, if a Yehudi was eating with a non-Yehudi at the table and left jugs of wine on the table and a jug on the side table, and he left it and went out, what is on the table is forbidden, as it is likely that the non-Yehudi handled it, whereas what is on the side table is permitted, but If the Yehudi said to the non-Yehudi, mix water with the wine and drink, even the jug that is on the side table is forbidden. Similarly, open barrels are forbidden, but sealed barrels are permitted unless the Yehudi was out of the room for sufficient time for the non-Yehudi to open the barrel by removing the stopper, stop it again by making a new stopper, and for the new stopper to dry. Pshita Ma'otema Kure Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Gadonile Kamashman. The Gemara asks, isn't this obvious? This ruling is stated explicitly in the Mishnah. The Gemara answers, lest you say that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel teaches the entire clause, and this is the continuation of his previous statement and not an unattributed statement of the Mishnah. Rava teaches us that this is not so. I still understand. We've stated, a few times that Sanhedrin 86, that a Stam Mishnah is like Reb Meir. So why is Rava saying that a Stam Mishnah is like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? My time the law mit binan chamra biad goyim mishum shayika. The Gemara asks, and since we maintain that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who is not concerned about a bored hole in the barrel, and even though there is a concern that the non-Yehudi may have opened and replaced the stopper, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who is not concerned with forgery of the seal, because excessive effort is required to forge a seal. C31a. Therefore, nowadays, what is the reason we do not place wine in sealed barrels in the possession of non-Yehudim? The Gemara answers it is because of the bung hole, the hole in the barrel through which one smells the wine, which the non-Yehudi might widen a bit to drink from it. Amar Zone Goya Yisrael Subnes La Chamashare Nihi Netak Yunus. Rava says the case of a Gentile substitute, where the Jews were, I said substitute, I was substituting it for, a woman for hire. In the case of a Gentile substitute, where Yehudim, a non-Yehudi substitute, where Yehudim were dining at her table, the wine at the table is permitted. Granted, their passion for the sin of harlotry overwhelmed. Wait a minute. What are they doing at that table? It's kind of like Rav is saying that it's okay for them to be at the table. The wine is permitted. They're not allowed to, sleep with them, but the wine they can drink. It just seems a little strange to me. But anyway,